I'm Chef Thomas Keller, and you're listening to Ingredients Insiders.
This is Ingredient Insiders. I'm John Magazzino.
And I'm Andrea Parkins.
On each episode of Ingredient Insiders, we'll be talking with chefs and food writers about their favorite ingredients.
We then speak to the producer of that ingredient to learn its history, how it's made, and why chefs love using it in their kitchens.
We have, again, for the second time, one of the greatest chefs joining us today.
A 7 Michelin star recipient.
Yeah, there's not too many of those. He's got 2 restaurants. I think he's the only person in North America that has 2 Michelin 3-star restaurants going at the same time. He also has another star for his restaurant in Florida.
And I really think that he is a kind of a mentor, or, you know, kind of many chefs who are coming up in the industry look up to him.
He's an icon. And of course, we're talking about Chef Thomas Keller, and he's going to be joining us in just a couple minutes here in the Bronx to talk about cup for cup gluten-free flour.
Which I think is such an important topic today. I think many people are learning that they have gluten sensitivities or they have celiac disease. And, you know, he was a kind of a revolutionary in this topic. He hired someone I actually graduated from culinary school with, Lena Kwok, to, an R&D chef to create this amazing flour blend that really is cup for cup. You can, take a cup of flour, a cup of all-purpose flour, and you can sub it for a cup of this gluten-free flour, and it will perform exactly how, a typical recipe would.
Yeah, I've never been tested for any allergies or intolerance, but I have to tell you, I just feel better, more energetic. And, as much as I love traditional bread, I would rather eat a gluten-free bread or cookie.
Sure. And I think now you can, because, the flour blends and the ingredients are so much better than what they were 10, 15 years ago. So I can't wait to talk to Chef Keller all about how it came to be and what's on the horizon for him. I'm really excited.
We're going to be talking about cup for cup gluten-free flour on Ingredient Insiders with Chef Thomas Keller, coming right up.
Today's episode is brought to you by Cup for Cup Gluten-Free Flour, the flour that's revolutionizing kitchens everywhere. Whether you're whipping up a storm for a crowd or perfecting your personal recipes, Cup for Cup is your go-to for seamless gluten-free cooking and baking. Cup for Cup's multi-purpose flour makes it easy to transform traditional recipes into gluten-free creations that taste just like the original, if not better. Imagine making your favorite pastries, breads, and sauces without having to adjust for taste and texture. That's the magic Cup for Cup brings to your kitchen. Don't miss out on making your culinary creations accessible to everyone without compromising on taste or texture. Cup for Cup. It's not just gluten-free, it's gourmet. This season of Ingredient Insiders is brought to you by Bizzini Nuts, a name synonymous with exceptional quality and taste in the world of gourmet nuts and dried fruits. Whether you're crafting a Michelin star-worthy dish or just whipping up something delicious in your home kitchen, Bizzini's premium selection is designed to inspire your culinary creativity. Elevate your dishes with the rich texture and flavors that only Bizzini Nuts can offer. From toasted almonds, perfect for garnishing, to pistachios that add a crunch to your salads, Bizzini has everything you need to enhance your recipes. Don't miss this chance to impress your palate and your guests with Bizzini Nuts, the chef's choice for quality and flavor.
This episode is in partnership with the Chef's Warehouse and produced by Gotham Production Studios in New York City. Again, we are in the presence of greatness, Andrea.
No, stop it.
This is amazing. No, it's true. This is the second time.
2-time Ingredient Insiders guest.
Yeah. Chef Thomas Keller's here. Last time we spoke all about bones in Yountville, and now we're on our home turf in the Bronx, and we're going to talk about Cup for Cup gluten-free flour, which is an incredible product.
It is. It was the first of its kind.
How did this even start? Let's talk about Cup for Cup.
Yeah.
It's interesting because, things begin, right? The most impactful things begin with a need, right? And that was it. So with the coronet, which I think and a lot of people know, it looks like a little ice cream cone, but it's a savory component, and it's very simple in its flavor profiles. It's a cracker with some sesame seeds on it, and we fill it with a little bit of sour cream, which is creme fraiche, and some pickled red onions, and then top it with salmon. So you think about a cracker with sour cream, onions, and salmon. It's a reference point that you really understand.
And that's one of the hallmarks of going to the French Laundry, or even per se today, where you walk
every meal
in
starts in
and
with
you
that
get
bite.
this beautiful little ice cream cone with topped with salmon. So
it's got to make you laugh. I mean,
but
it's cute. It's cute.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it contains gluten.
Yeah. Yeah. So for 20 some odd years, right, we couldn't serve it to those who were gluten-free. And I thought, I always felt a little embarrassed by that. Like, why couldn't we come up with something like as clever as the cornet for somebody who is gluten intolerant or celiac?
Did you have something else for them?
What was the side?
Yeah,
It's just like you just did it.
It's kind of
A
embarrassing.
cucumber?
Okay.
It was very lame.
Yeah, just a
right?
cucumber.
Yeah, it was like lame, right?
With a piece of dill on it.
No, but that wasn't vegetarian because they could eat salmon. They just couldn't eat. They just couldn't eat the
gluten.
cornet. They
Right.
couldn't have gluten. So our first research and development chef, I sent her on a task to develop a non-gluten cornet. Had to smell, taste, feel, and look like the cornet. I couldn't be different, right? Because then people go like, well, that's lame too, right? It's got to look the same. And 6 months later, she brought me a cornet, 2 cornets actually, side by side, and you couldn't really tell the difference. And here it is, chef. And that became the mainstay, right, for those individuals who were gluten intolerant or celiac for the cornet. It was really a beautiful accomplishment. I really have to, the hats off to Lana Kwok, who was our research and development chef in doing that. And I said, okay, we'll go make some really beautiful rolls, not rolls that you see in the grocery store gluten-free, but something that you would see at the French Laundry. And she did that. And at the same time, she said to me, Chef, I think I can develop a flour that, can replace, the flours that are today, but something that was complete. And she brought me several months later a different array of baked ingredients, all made with this flour that she developed, which we called Cup for Cup. Called Cup for Cup because you can replace that amount of flour in your current recipe with our flour, Cup for Cup, and turn it to a non-gluten product. And this was just remember, this was the first complete, and that's the key word there, complete non-gluten flours to the market. There had been other non-gluten flours available, yes. You needed to use the recipes that the manufacturers or the producers were suggesting because they didn't work with everything.
So a lot of adjustments.
And or add other ingredients to modify. So, basically you had to follow somebody else's repertoire, right, to a recipe to produce something out of those non-gluten flours at the time. Ours, on the other hand, was complete, and you could use it cup for cup.
So you can take a cup of all-purpose flour and substitute it for the Cup for Cup, and it'll perform exactly the same way.
Yes.
I mean, that opens up so many doors for so many people. I mean, completely revolutionary.
The product is a huge hit.
Huge.
It's available in retail. We've got it here, obviously, for food service, and it's incredibly popular. We're finding that a lot of people are buying it that aren't even, they don't have the concerns of the celiac or the gluten intolerant. They're just like working with it.
Right.
We're seeing a lot of this change in the last couple of years. We're seeing, dairy-free butters that perform as well as that. One of the questions that comes to my mind is the French Laundry is open 30 years this year. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Per se is open 20 years this year. Have you seen a change in the requests from the diners saying, I'm gluten intolerant? Or
do you have to approach your menu decisions differently because of it?
Have things changed in that regard?
It's a very good question, and I would respond by saying it hasn't changed. I mean, we still have probably 10 to 12% of individuals that come to the restaurant who have modifications to the menu. And of course, at a restaurant like French Laundry per se, or any fine dining restaurant, any great restaurant or any really good restaurant, you asking the question, I need this or I need that, or, I'm allergic to this, it should not be a problem. I mean, we have the resources, we have the team, we have the talent to basically accomplish almost anything that a guest may need or want, right? And that's something that I always want to say. It's like, don't be embarrassed, in a restaurant by saying I'm vegan or I can't eat, this or I can't eat that. It's okay, right? We're here for you, so it's all good. But the flour. So the other thing that we continue to do is we've always had now a research and development chef. Devin Nell is our current research and development chef, who continues to work with Cup for Cup in building new repertoire using. I mean, he just was successful at making a bagel. So if there are questions that you have, right, don't hesitate to contact us, right? You can contact us through our website, because Devin, and our team of chefs be happy to work with you in making sure that you're accomplishing what you want to accomplish with Cup for Cup.
That's a great resource for chefs. If you're trying to develop a recipe, you want to do something, in your own kitchen, you can reach out and leverage the knowledge of their R&D chef.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
I'm amazed where I feel like the whole gluten-free category has come a very long way.
It really has.
You just mentioned the bagel, and I think of like pizza, and years ago I always feel that things were very like hard and crumbly and not necessarily
very dry.
You're missing the gluten, that gumminess out of a bagel. But today you're finding that the products are almost indiscernible. I'm not gluten intolerant as far as I know, but I know that I feel better
100%
when I eat gluten-free, whether that means eating gluten-free breads or cookies or whatever it is. I just feel better. And I think that
it's an inflammatory type response when you eat a lot of gluten. So, reducing that was definitely going to reduce the stress on your joints and, your whole body. I mean, I was doing some research. Right now it's 6% of Americans have some sort of gluten intolerance. So you're talking about 20 million Americans. Yeah. So, it's definitely, and that number is rising. So I think that this conversation, it's extremely relevant, and I think you're going to continue to see improvements as the years go on. I have a gluten sensitivity, and I remember I was in college, I was at Johnson & Wales, and this is 2003. They didn't even talk about it. I went to Whole Foods. They had a little freezer section, and I lived on their chocolate chip cookies. That's all that they had. Now the selection's enormous. So it's really changed.
It's a good thing. I think there was an article years ago, on Novak Djokovic, and he was, in his quest to be number one tennis player. I think he was third at the time. He had changed so many things about his routine, and one of his changes was he removed gluten from his diet. He claimed that his endurance was increased and his stamina was increased. And so those two things alone, you think about that, right? And being able to have that, and you mentioned it as energy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it was actually true. And so we eliminate some of these things from our diets, and we see massive modifications in our behaviors.
It's pretty interesting. So you mentioned the cornet, you mentioned a lot of the baked goods, and what are other uses? Where are people using the gluten-free flour? Obviously, they're using it where they can use flour. Is it being put into sauces at the French Laundry? If someone, where is flour being used, and where is it being replaced in your restaurants?
Well, you think about the starches that are part of Cup for Cup, and they're all modified starches. So much like tapioca starch or cornstarch, right? This is what it is. So yes, the ability for it to become a hydrocolloid, right, is there, right? It does thicken things in the same way that flour thickens things. And so yes, we can use it in those ways as well. I mean, we use it, at Ad Hoc to produce a gluten-free fried chicken, which to me is better than the regular fried chicken using normal flour, just because it stays crispier longer, right? They're modified starches, so a tempura, if you will, right?
And that's a big statement because that's some of the best damn fried chicken anywhere. Yeah. So is that all of the fried chicken, or is that just to order? Just to order.
Remember, all of us have to remember, number one, it's more expensive than flour, so that's always a consideration. We have to be respectful to that. Yeah. And number two is, we can't produce something that's totally non-gluten in our restaurants or our bakeries, because our bakeries are full of flour.
Right.
So it's more like gluten friendly.
Good gluten friendly. Yeah. So unless you have a facility that actually is allocated for non-gluten products, and you're baking or whatever you're making, right, is isolated from everything else, you may run into problems with that a little bit. So just be respectful of where you are, the flour that is around your facility and what you're doing, and And
I know we sell two different SKUs. I think one might be a dairy-free and one is not. I think that's the difference between the two of them.
Well, actually, we've done one that is a whole grain, which is wonderful. So it has whole grains in it that are again non-gluten. our blue bag, which we call our blue bag, has some milk powder in it. So a lot of people who are celiac are also intolerant to lactose, and so we have to be careful with that. We are in the process, or have already developed a non-dairy product as well. So we continue to explore. We continue to be resourceful in what we're doing. We're motivated to continue to make our products better, more user friendly, and more versatile.
Is there anything else in this category that's on the horizon?
Well, we've done some mixes, which they do okay. The pizza mix is probably one of the better ones. Our brownie mix is one of the better ones. When I say better ones, I should say higher performance. They're all really good. Devin's done a tremendous job with myself in developing the mixes, and the quality and the relationship to what we're a Duncan Hines yellow cake mix, for example, right, which we're all kind of used to. It just depends. Yeah, I think that for us, we've primarily focused on our flours, which have the biggest impact because they're the most versatile, like the most dynamic, and that's where we find the market.
And I can see that being really interesting to chefs as well, who they don't want that cross-contamination. They can just open up a mix, make it in clean, dishware, and you have something that doesn't have that contamination.
Right. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, absolutely. So another thing I would love to talk about is, in addition to the amazing restaurants, you also now, we just spoke about proper stocks and sauces. You have Cup for Cup.
Yep.
There's the line of chocolate
K plus,
you have.
K plus M. Chocolate,
K plus M. Is there anything else that you're doing in the product space that we should be talking about?
We have Regis Ova caviar.
Oh, and the caviar.
Yeah, the caviar. So Xiaoqing Bishop, who's my partner, who successfully ran Sterling caviar for years, and we became partners about 6 or 7 years ago. Our primary product comes from China, and it's where the largest. Well, right now, in a period of 10 years, they've grown their farm to be the largest producer of high quality caviar in the world.
Wow!
And so we're really lucky to have partnered with them and being able to offer that to our guests and to the consumers, right?
And you have a beautiful caviar lounge in Yountville. If you're lucky enough to get to Yountville, which Andrea and I call Kellerville.
Why aren't we there right now, John?
Because we're in the Bronx. Where would you rather be, in the Bronx or Yountville?
There isn't very good caviar here in the Bronx.
Yeah, we're looking at pavement outside.
But they have the Regis Ova Lounge, and that's been open how long now?
3 years.
Wow.
It was a pop-up. Now we've made it permanent. And so, we have a wonderful young chef, Jeffrey Higoisia, who was the U.S. chef for the culinary team for the Bocuse d'Or, and he's done a tremendous job in developing a menu. So it's leaning towards Asian, right, which I love, and so we are able to marry those two things together in a very significant way, and so now it's become a permanent restaurant.
Do you feel like caviar is having a moment right now?
Yeah, definitely. It's fascinating to me that these different ingredients come into vogue, if you will. I don't want to say fashion because I don't think fashion has anything to do with it. But people start to learn about them, they start to experience them, they start to appreciate them in many ways. I mean, if you look at the past 50 years, in culinary culture in America, extra virgin olive oil. There are a number of different things. Just French mustard, right? But, all these different ingredients we've actually learned about, right, and appreciate and have grown in popularity, around our country. And it's a wonderful thing to see how our culinary culture has continued to expand.
I always talk about cheese with my daughters because they have all these different cheeses that they go to the store and they come back and tell me about. And I'm like, do you have any idea when I was in high school what cheese looked like?
Right.
It wasn't pretty.
Everything, tomatoes. Lettuces. The list is on. You walk into a grocery store and you just look around and you go, "Where did all this stuff come from?" It came from chefs. Yeah, right. It came from us exposing our guests to these ingredients, and then the consumer going to the grocery store and saying, "Can you get me some fresh tarragon?" And the produce man said, "Well, I'll look for that." And pretty soon, there's fresh tarragon in the stores. So
it really is amazing. I think of. You mentioned some other chefs earlier, but Andre Soltner, the great chef of Lutece, and he said when he came to the U.S. and he wanted to use mushrooms, he was relegated to, he would get cans of chanterelles, which I can't think of any restaurant today that would consider using those. No. But we've come such a long way in the world of food.
I really think social media and people traveling more is driving a lot of this, because I think people, they go on Instagram or TikTok or whatever it is, and they're like, I want that. And they make the trip. They're doing, trips just to eat at a restaurant.
For sure.
And I don't think maybe even 20, 25 years ago, like people weren't doing that.
Yeah.
Before Facebook, came to be.
Somehow we just we think things happen, sooner than they did. So 25 years ago, remember, French Laundry was open already for 5 years.
Well, so except for French Laundry,
let's go back. I think we have to go back 50 or 60 years ago to realize where some of this began. And you start to think about this, and you start to say, where did the culinary culture of America, get its rebirth or its start? And you think of people like Julia Child, right? Yes. Who after World War II came back and started, writing her book. I mean, that was a great introduction. You think about, Jacqueline Kennedy, right? Who was a Francophile, right? Who she was the first lady to hire a French chef, right, to become the chef of the White House. I mean, before that, it was U.S., it was Navy, it was Navy cooks,
Army cooks,
right? Yeah. Who were cooking, and she brought in, René Verdon. I mean, and the whole idea about France and opening up that opportunity. You think about those individuals. Think about Jean-Louis Paladin, right, in the early 70s, coming to the Watergate in Washington, D.C., and what Jean-Louis did, for people. You think of Alice Waters. I mean, you think of all these different things that happen, these benchmarks, right, throughout our history after World War II, which really began this process of understanding and extending, our knowledge, our experience, and our desires, for really good food.
I think you should write a book about it. You speak so, no, I'm serious. You speak like, just in the demo that you just did, you talked about this, and just like, I'm, captivated. So just,
Andrea is a publisher on the side. She's a book agent. Give me your business card.
Yeah, but it's fascinating. You start to just think back about some of these people who we don't really realize who've had such an impact.
Yeah.
I mean, just think about, Chuck Williams, right? I mean, coming back from World War II and starting Williams-Sonoma, right?
Yeah.
And giving us all these beautiful tools.
Yeah.
We didn't have those kinds of tools before, right? You think of Robert Mondavi, right? Who, opened Mondavi Winery in 1968. Right, which really was the catalyst for Napa Valley and for great American wines. I mean, these things happened way before we realize, or sometimes we remember. So.
Speaking of Napa Valley, how did you end up in Northern California? Because you were a chef in New York. You grew up in Florida mainly, and
I was born in California.
Yeah.
Partially grew up in Florida.
Yeah.
And then moved to New York, and then France, and then back to New York. Finally ending up in LA after one of my restaurants closed here in New York City, or actually my only restaurant closed here in New York City, and found my way to Napa Valley. Jonathan Waxman, who's a good friend of mine, opening a restaurant in Napa Valley, said to me, "There's a restaurant in Yountville I think you should look at." I drove up to the French Laundry and fell in love.
This is 1994.
This was 1992.
Before
1991. Yeah, okay. 1991, 92.
And it's not like it was a Siberia. It was still the Napa Valley, but there weren't a lot of restaurants there then, were there?
No, there were a few. I mean, one of the great things about Napa Valley, because of the wine, right, and because of the explosion of wine in America, there were good chefs there. There were a couple of good restaurants. I mean, Jonathan Waxman, who was one of the most recognized American chefs in the country,
Michael's,
was opening a restaurant in Napa Valley. So you saw this, saw this going on. Masa, who not Masa Takayama, Claude Ruas, when he opened Auberge, brought Masa there in the early 70s, right? And that was a significant restaurant during the time. So there were some significant restaurants. And the French Laundry in of itself was significant, opened in 1978. And if you ever read anything about Napa Valley during that period of time, like where to go to eat, where to stay, what to see, the French Laundry was always in that list of where to go to eat, right? The Schmitz. And so, Napa Valley was on a path, right, from that 1968 benchmark with Robert Mondavi, right, to become what it is today, in large part, all of that, the Napa Valley, Vintners Association, which was founded back then, was a big part of that. And then, starting attracting chefs. You think about Napa Valley, it is, one of the very few places, and probably the premier wine growing region in America. And people go there to eat and drink.
Yep.
And so as a chef, this is like you're in nirvana. It's like,
Yeah.
you know.
And was the French Laundry a instant success from the moment you opened the doors, or were there challenges out of the gate?
No, I think there's challenges with opening any restaurant. But yes, I mean, the French Laundry became quite popular, right? Within the first year. Michael Bauer, who was our local food critic for the San Francisco Chronicle, gave us 3.5 stars. And this is kind of interesting. The biggest influencer on the French Laundry wasn't a food writer or food critic. It was actually our social columnist. You know, back then all newspapers had social columnists. They don't anymore. Herb Cain was our social columnist in San Francisco Chronicle, and of course every weekday there was an article from Herb about whatever happened the night before, social things. And
who was there.
Exactly, right, where they go. And Herb and his wife had dinner at the French Laundry. And typically it would be like one paragraph at the most about something that happened the night before. Herb wrote 3 paragraphs about the French Laundry.
Wow.
And the difference in Herb or, you know, something like Michael Bauer is you had to be interested in food and wine to read Michael Bauer. Everybody read Herb Cain. And that was significant because then everybody, you know, read about the French Laundry and wanted to come. That was a significant moment for us. And I'm trying to think, that was probably early 95 or late 94.
This is a little bit off the French Laundry topic, but what would be a piece of advice that you would give to, you know, recent culinary grads or someone who's aspiring, you know, to be a chef?
Really good question. I was just talking to a young man, just, you know, at the event, because he was asking me, you know, he's like, Chef, what advice could you give me? And I said, you know, he's struggling. He feels he's not good enough. I mean, a lot of questions coming into your mind as a young person. The same thing with myself at sometimes. I mean, you know, you're not always confident in what you're doing. And what I tell a young person like that is be patient. Number one, don't be anxious. And he said, I'm anxious. I've got the high anxiety. I said, don't be anxious. Just be patient. You know, try to modify that behavior to patience. Don't understand. You're a young person. You've got a lot to learn. You know, take your time, right? With what you're learning. You know you're going to make mistakes. It's okay, right? Correct your mistakes, right? Those are important. Those are important things. So patience is a really important thing for young people to understand, which is difficult for a young person, including myself when I was young. And then the second is persistent. Don't let anybody tell you can't do something. You can do anything you want. I sit here today because of that persistence. You know, and someone tells me I could do something, I can't do something. It's like, no, I can do this, right? Took me a while to figure it out, but I can do it. So just be persistent.
Patience and persistence. I like that.
Yep.
Is there anything that you wish you would have said yes to?
No, there's more things I wish I would have said no to.
Okay. That's fair. Totally fair.
Pretty funny.
Do you have like a food, like a snack or like midnight
that's a
snack?
Great question.
What does Thomas Keller
what does the 7
in front of the
Michelin,
refrigerator at 10 p.m.?
Yeah, what does the 7 Michelin star man like to have as his late night snack?
Guilty pleasure, yeah.
Yeah, well, you know, fortunately, I've gone out of that phase of my life. I don't eat late night snacks anymore. Primarily because, you know, I really want to make sure I'm maintaining, you know, my health.
How do you stay so fit? I meet these great chefs.
He's not getting out of this question.
Okay, go ahead.
So I mean, you know, back in the day when I was really, you know, engaged in running the kitchen at the French Laundry, at the end of the night, we would have whatever wine we wanted to have a glass of. There would be 6 or 7 of us, you know, gathered around the pass, and we'd be talking about the menu. We'd have a glass of wine. You know, there'd be some bread around, there'd be some cheese around, and that was it. I mean, you know, having a glass of red wine at midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning with some cheese, that was like a piece of bread.
Sounds good to me.
That was the perfect late night snack, right?
Do you cook at home?
I cook my breakfast at home. Yeah.
Got it.
So other than that, and occasionally we'll cook at home, but not very often. You know, in the summertime, right? It's just, you know, working all day, you know, and then going home and making dinner. You know, it's a little bit taxing. So, and, you know, we have Bouchon, La Calinda, Ad Hoc, Regis Ova right down the street. So
I would like caviar for dinner.
I want tacos.
Yeah.
But speaking of La Calinda, we went there last time we were in Nashville last year. Amazing Mexican food. So fantastic.
You sent me pictures. It looked
Is there any type of cuisine that you haven't forayed into that you would like to? Obviously, you've covered French. Mm-hmm. You've got Mexican. You've got
Well, we have American. So we
You've
have,
got
we have
American.
French, we have American and Surf Club.
Surf Club, also amazing.
We have
So good.
Mexican with La Calenda,
Yeah.
which I don't, I'm not a Mexican chef, nor do I want to be a Mexican chef, nor do I really need to think that I need to understand how things are made.
Yeah.
I just want it to be really good. So hiring the right people was critical.
Yeah.
Kalen Ulrich, I know it sounds like he's Dutch. His father was Dutch. His mother was American, but he was born and raised in Oaxaca. He became our opening chef and still consults for us, 6 to 7 years later. Ad Hoc is beautiful. I mean, it's very American, things that we would typically eat at home, right? Your my mother never gave me a menu. I'm not sure if your mother gave you a menu.
No, not often.
Yeah. So Ad Hoc is based on that. It's like you come to the restaurant, you eat what we make. And dietary restrictions, no problem. I mean, there are some options, but typically it's a one menu show.
Like supper clubby?
No, it's really kids running around. I mean, rock and roll music, children running around. I mean, it's super casual.
Andrea knew the answer to that. Yeah. She just wants an invitation to Yountville. Okay, we'll go, Andrea. We'll go.
Yeah, it's a prefix menu, kind of like the French Laundry.
Okay.
4-course menu, very simple. You can eat at the bar and order a la carte. You get a dinner, same as you would at home, right? It's no different.
All right, you talked me into it.
Okay, and then now we have Asian, right, with Jeffrey. At RO, which I'm really happy about. That was the choice between Mexican. When we opened La Calenda, it was either Mexican or Asian. I chose Mexican, but now we've modified RO to become more Asian. So we have everything.
It's important. You said you hired the right people. And I think that is another good tip. If you are opening a restaurant, making sure, I want to be, an Italian restaurant, find the best people to support you to get to where you want to be. It's hard to do this job. Yeah. So find the right people.
Hire people that are smarter than you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, if you look also at the alumnus of Chef Keller, you're talking about kind of the who's who of the next generation of great chefs.
We always talk about the family tree.
Grant Achatz, and you talk about Jonathan Beno. There's a million. Corey Lee.
Yeah, Corey Lee. I mean, Brian McClamory. I mean, there's so many of them. You've named some well-known chefs, but I mean, there are just dozens of others. But that's not unusual. I mean, you look at the first generation of American chefs, and whether there's a dozen of us or 18 of us, I'm not sure how you want to qualify the first generation.
Yep.
But I'm part of that generation, and you look at all of the young chefs that work for us and have gone out to new things, and you realize the explosion of the quality of restaurants around the country. I mean, in every location. I mean, I was just in Nashville recently eating with Sean Brock. I mean, just amazing chef doing really wonderful food and two different genres. He has the casual restaurant downstairs and the fine dining restaurant upstairs. I mean, just wonderful. And, Nashville 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, what was Nashville? Birmingham, Alabama. Frank Stitt, moved there 40 years ago. I moved back home and opened his restaurants there. I mean, even recently, our great friend Gavin Kaysen in Minneapolis. I mean, so you see, right, the generations of young chefs that have worked for chefs who've come out of my generation, and you realize that this is American culinary culture, right? This is it, and they're everywhere now.
That
was chapter one, or maybe the forward to his book. Yeah.
So much has happened in such a short period of time.
Yeah.
We are grateful to chefs like yourself who really led the way with this. I mean, again, you mentioned Gavin Kaysen in Minneapolis. It's like there's good food everywhere in America now, and it's thanks to chefs like...
It's not just New York City and LA anymore. It's everywhere.
Yeah. But Gavin's the second generation. I can't remember who the first generation in Minneapolis was, but there was a chef there, back in the 80s that was doing some really great work. Yeah. There was a chef in Detroit who's doing great work at the Rattlesnake Club. Right?
Was there a long time
so
ago,
many of them that are that didn't get the recognition or were there a little bit before the time. Timing is important, right? But look at Chris Pappas, what he's done with Chef Warehouse and where that began. As I said, I remember Chris walking into Raquel in 1984 or 1985, whatever, saying, can you buy my butter? Well, that's kind of where it all began. And you see today what Chef Warehouse is and what it represents and the opportunities that chefs have through this company alone, right, is just extraordinary. So,
well, we cannot thank you enough for coming back on and chatting with us and talking to us about Cup for Cup flour.
And coming to the mothership in the Bronx today.
Talk about full circle.
Pretty special.
Chris Pappas is selling you butter. Now you're here and we're selling your products. I mean, that's pretty amazing.
this has all happened in my lifetime. You start to think about it. I mean, I'm just so proud of what we've done in our country, and what we offer our guests, what the consumer has access to now is just mind blowing to me from where we started from 50 years ago.
It is.
Well,
thank you.
Yeah, thank you again. And we'll have to make another trip out for episode number 3 to California.
Absolutely.
Or maybe Florida.
Ooh.
Yeah,
we'll see.
Anywhere. We're there.
All right. Thanks, Chef.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Ingredient Insiders. Follow us on Instagram at Ingredient Insiders. You can find the products we discussed on today's episode at chefswarehouse.com or at your favorite specialty retailer.